Hello and welcome to the Mission TV show. We're so happy to have you back with us again. Before we start, I just want to share with you one of my favorite texts as well, but it's the favorite text of our guest today. It's found in Revelation 14, verse 6 and 7. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel, to preach unto them that dwell in the earth, and to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth, and the sea, and the fountains of water. We have special guests today with us, Terri Saelee and Carol Reynolds, and I just want to welcome you to the show today. It's such a pleasure to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I know it's spur of the moment, but we're so thankful that God gave us this opportunity today.
I am too.
And you both work in a very special ministry, and most of the time our interviews are with people that are missionaries outside of America, but I know much of your work is actually here. What is it exactly that you do?
Well, we coordinate refugee and immigrant ministries within the North American division.
Okay, so what does that mean, refugee and immigrant? How do you define?
Well, that's a good question. A refugee is someone who has crossed international borders fleeing from persecution.
Okay.
And so there are many internally displaced people, but a refugee is someone who has had to leave their own country, and usually there's a country of asylum and then a third country. And countries like US, Canada, Australia, and France and others are typically third countries where refugees who just cannot return to their home due to a very, very real fear of persecution or war, are accepted for resettlement in a third country.
Okay.
So refugees, and there's another term that is not in our name, but it's very much a part of our work as well. Refugees, and in the U.S. we call them asylees, or Canada calls them refugee applicants, are people who are able to get to, say, the U.S. or Canada under another visa, but and it's when they're already here that they let us know the persecution they've been through and their fear of returning. So in the U.S. we call them asylees, and they have also fled persecution. So refugees, asylees, and immigrants, and actually another group that is kind of under our umbrella is international students, who are an incredible group of people that need to hear the gospel.
Right, and they come here and they're coming here to study, but
yes,
if they can learn the gospel while they're here, that's such an amazing thing. That's one thing that we wanted to talk about, and that is what God's plan is for sending them here.
Yes.
So why don't you go ahead? Do you have a quote you'd like to share at this point? Or?
I surely do. One of my favorite quotes it just gives me goosebumps to read it, because as I study unreached people groups, I always thought we were pretty close to getting the gospel around to the world, because we've reached 209 of the 228 nations and areas recognized by the UN. But I didn't realize that every one of those, many of those countries, even the small ones, have dozens of language groups, many of which are totally unreached. And I discovered that just the unreached language groups total 6,898 language groups without a Christian influence. And if we just count the unreached people within those language groups, not the English speakers who haven't yet become Christians, but just the people who have no access to the gospel, even if they had some reason to be able to want to learn about Christ, they would have no way. Total 2.7 billion. Imagine that. That's close to half the world's population that's completely unreached still by the gospel. And our church membership grew by 1 million last year, but world population grew by 75 million. So the job's not getting easier.
No.
And so the sooner we can reach these precious souls with the gospel that we have come to love, but maybe not value as much as we should, as much as they do when they hear it for the first time. So one of my favorite quotes, when I think of how we can possibly reach these unreached people, many of which live in countries that do not accept missionaries, they're resistant to the gospel, the government does not allow outside missionaries in. I think
no proselytizing, no conversions.
Right.
No.
How can we ever reach them? Not to mention the expense. I did some research and I found out that to reach the gospel, to reach all the unreached people, to reach the world with the gospel in this generation, every member would need to reach 163 people within, not our neighbors here, but we would have to reach 163 of these people from unreached people groups, unreached language groups. And so it's
and most of us aren't going over there to look for them.
Right. So how can we reach them all? And when I ran across this quote, it just opened my eyes. I know that God's biddings are enablings. I know He has a way for us to accomplish the mission He gives us. But until I saw this quote, I didn't see how in the world it could happen. But now that I discovered this quote, I see it happening. I just love this quote. I just had to read it over and over again. If we were quick, it says, in discerning the opening providences of God, we should be able to see in the multiplying opportunities to reach many foreigners in America. There are 104,000 foreigners coming into the U.S. every day.
Every day.
And talk about multiplying opportunities. When this was written, it was just thousands. Now it's 100,000 per day. And this is actually, if we realized what God was doing, this is a divinely appointed means of rapidly extending the third angel's message into all nations of the earth.
Well, because they have a home there. They usually have family there. They have somebody they're in contact with somehow.
Yes. They always stay in touch with someone back home. And they have that trust relationship. For us as missionaries, going over, it takes time to build trust. And
you have to prove yourself.
Right. And I don't know if you ever really feel as close to someone from another culture as you would automatically feel with your own family. Right. So when we are faithful in reaching the people here, and then sometimes it only takes a phone call. There's a girl from Mongolia that showed up at our church. That's a miracle story. They had done an article, a member of our church had done an article for the Northside News in Madison, Wisconsin, where we live. And across the page from that was an article about a man who had just turned 100. Well, unbeknownst to us, there was a Mongolian girl caring for him. She had never read the Northside News until a neighbor brought that story of the man she was taking care of. She looked up across the page and saw a picture of our family that had come to reach the Hmong people in the area. And she said, oh, here is an Asian man. My husband is Hmong, and his family, and they're within walking distance. It's over a mile, but she walked to get to the church. And long story short, she was baptized, and she ended up calling home and said, Mom, you need to find an Adventist church. Wow. And then she emailed me and said her brother is in Europe, and could I find an English-speaking church for him to go to because he doesn't speak German. So she is reaching people on 2 continents just through phone and internet. And I could tell story after story of how people reached here reach out to their...
Makes a difference.
Yes, they reach their relatives back home.
Wow, that's amazing. To move, I don't know, a little more personal, how did you end up in the refugee side? I know both of you have different stories, but somewhat, I don't know, same part of the world anyway.
Yes.
So, Carol, would you like to briefly share? I think you've shared on another show, but if you...
Yeah. Many years ago, as I was growing up, I always wanted to be a missionary. And so when the opportunity finally came for me to go to Asia, it was to help with Cambodian refugees back in 1980. I was just a young girl. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't even know what a refugee was. And it kind of transformed my life because later my husband and I spent 12 years as missionaries, full-time missionaries in Thailand. And I've always had such a heart for the refugees ever since that experience of being in those camps and seeing, 150,000 people just crammed together in little huts and dying for the lack of the most basic of help. We were a team over there. There was a lot of different volunteers over there helping out, but it just, really opened my eyes. Like, these people were innocent. It was just because of a war that they were caught in this situation. And then later, I know that many of them came to America. And they were starting to go at that point. And I knew people over here that were reaching out to them. And it just kind of really opened my eyes because I saw God's work just grow in those refugee camps. And before that, I had an aunt and uncle that were missionaries in Cambodia, and they could hardly win a soul. It was very difficult work. But years later, and when they were uprooted, they'd been through this horrible time in their lives, they were open to the gospel. Yeah.
That makes a huge difference, doesn't it?
Yes, that was my beginnings.
And Terri, what about you?
Well, my first contact was with Cambodian refugees in college. I was attending Union College in Nebraska, small Christian college, and on the bulletin board one day I noticed a note asking if any, students with cars would be willing to take Cambodian refugees to a church service in their language on Sabbath afternoons. And so I thought, sure, I have a car, an old boat, we called it. And so I went to pick them up, and the children ran out in the snow barefooted. And they were straight from the jungles. They had never experienced snow before. That was my first contact. And at the end of that year, my freshman year in college, I accepted a call to work in the refugee camps in Thailand. I worked in several in Ubon, at several camps with refugees, primarily from Laos, but also from Cambodia, Vietnam, and so forth. I went for 6 months, stayed 4 years, and ended up learning about 2.5 languages and loving it. I cried on the plane on the way back. Am I really doing the right thing to come back? Because when you're there, you're making a difference.
You can see.
You can see the message that we have grown up with is just like water in a thirsty land. That's a serious understatement. It's
water of life.
It's the water of life. In fact, one young man asked if he could tell me a story, and I said sure, and he said, well, he was 17 at the time, but he said, I was 10 when communism came into my country. My sister was just 7. And my parents had good jobs. We lived in the capital city, so they were among the first to be captured and taken to re-education camps, leaving my sister and me home alone. I knew I was the man of the house then. I had to take care of my sister, and so he tried to raise fish in the bathtub to sell them at the market to take care of his sister, but he soon realized that he just...
So they were a well-off family then?
They were well-off.
His parents were educated?
Yes, they were educated. When I met him in the camps, it was 7 years later. He had never heard from his parents or about his parents from new refugees coming. He said, I don't know if they're dead or alive. I don't know if I'll ever see them again. but I am so glad that communism came into my country. My mouth must have dropped open. How can you be glad when communism has torn your parents from you at such a young age? But he was quick to tell me why. He said, if communism had never come into my country, I would never have learned about God. It meant that much to him. And it gives me goosebumps to think of it, that it means that much to people who have never heard of God to learn.
It's kind of it's kind of like a window of opportunity that you have with people that are displaced because of war or persecution. They're far more open to the gospel than they would have been otherwise. It's an amazing opportunity.
When you're at home, when you have your home, you have things, you know, you have your job or your farm or, you know, whatever you're doing. It's kind of a planned life, and anything different is just that, different. But when everything's different and you don't have anything that's comfortable or feels safe or, you know, no security, then you can learn about God as your security.
When they're relocated to a country like America, you can only begin to imagine what it's like for the people from the jungle, you know, to come to our modern world. There's a lot of people from Burma arriving here that I'm working with, and I mean, in their village where their camp where they grew up, they never knew anything about modern conveniences. They've never seen a computer, never turned on running water, you know, a fan, whatever, you know, and so the adjustments are just incredible, and they need so much help in adjusting to life over here.
Yes.
And it's another window of opportunity to help them, and they appreciate it in ways that we can't even imagine.
Yes.
So it's those difficulties, you know, those completely new things and the difficulties. And one of those is the language.
Yes.
I mean, do they teach them English before they send them here?
Well, they
Some
do
of them,
teach some ESL classes, but it's
not much.
Basic.
not much, very basic. In fact, the group that my husband and I are working with, the Hmong, come here with an average of 0 to 4 years education. They come from the jungle. Some have been in the refugee camps only a few months when they come. Others have been there longer, but some camps don't offer much in terms of education. Their lives are in limbo. Karen refugees have been in the camps, some of them for decades. Many of them were born in the refugee camps. That's all they've known. You know, your life is on hold. You can't plan education, plan anything. You don't know how long you'll be there, if you'll ever be able to go back to your home country or ever be able to go to a third country. Only a fraction of displaced people actually get to go to a third country. And when they come, I don't think I have yet wrapped my mind around what it's like to go to a country where you know no one. And it's a language you don't know, you don't recognize the words. I remember a woman asking me to help her. When things come in the mail, they don't know whether it's an important document that they better get filled out and sent back within a time frame, or if it's junk mail advertisements. They don't know. One woman asked if I could call her doctor and ask for a refill for a prescription. Post-traumatic shock syndrome often sets in after they get to the States, about 6 months or a year after they get here. And I think it's partly because, as a nurse described it to me, even though they've been through a lot, they still have hope that they're going to a third country where they will be able to rebuild their lives. And they plan on coming and learning the language, becoming productive citizens where they can really be producers, not consumers, and not just sit idle. But when they get here, they soon realize that it's way more difficult than they ever dreamed. Their skill set from the jungles, many of them have honed gardening skills over centuries. Any of our ornamental plants, to them, they could tell you what medicinal properties they have. But when they get here, they're dropped in the middle of the urban jungle, you know, the cities where They don't even,
They don't even see grass.
No.
In so many places.
And no place to plant even their herbal medicines. And so their skills don't fit here. They don't have the skills for here. And in the families, it's an automatic generation gap because the children see their parents as clueless, helpless, skillless, because they don't see their parents productive in the skills that they do have. And
the children quickly learn the language and pick up the culture, but
right,
the parents are often, so the roles get reversed.
exactly.
The children then have to interpret for the parents and read things for the parents, and the family dynamics are totally
Very
messed
hard
up.
on the
Yes, and then the children are the ones to interpret the child abuse laws to the parents. You can't punish me, I'll call the police on you, And so it's really a sad situation. So one thing that we can do is to provide or find vacant lots in the city, talk to the city, and they're often glad to have people come in and do gardening, community gardens. And it's beautiful to see the young people when they first go, when they don't usually go to the garden during planting, but they go during the harvest. And to see what their parents have done opens their eyes to their parents' and grandparents' skills and helps them to appreciate them in ways that they haven't before.
So that brings us to the next question I have for you.
Yes.
What can we do to help these people? That's one thing we can do. What else? I mean, are there, you said in the urban areas, so if I live an hour from a big city, is it likely there's refugees near me?
In the past it wasn't, but now more and more. We were just discussing this before the interview. There are refugees now all across North America. Distribution maps have gone from, you expect to see people from other cultures in California, Florida, these areas, but it's filling in North Dakota, Michigan, Minnesota.
I feel so sorry for the refugees from Burma and
Yes.
Cambodia that get sent to North Dakota. It's
Yes.
Like you said, they don't know what snow is.
Right, and they're not prepared for. I remember when I grew up in Nebraska, but we moved from California to Wisconsin in the fall and hit the first snowstorm of the year in Wyoming. Oh, and here we knew the language and everything, so we quickly bought some winter clothes. We knew how to dress, but they haven't had that experience. But
so they need help in basic ways.
There are so many things that we can do for them, from teaching English to tutoring their children to helping them decipher their mail, what's important and what's not important, helping them fill out forms, just, cleaning out our closets, providing furniture, things that we have too much of, they have none of. And many refugees arrive here with fewer belongings than many flood victims here in the States, and with a language barrier and cultural differences besides. And so I love the quote that says it's acquaintance that awakens sympathy. And sympathy is the spring of effective ministry. I would say the first step is somehow get acquainted with a refugee family.
So that brings us to another question, and I know, Carol, you're waiting to say something. Go ahead. And then...
Well, I was just going to say that I used to think it was only the big cities that refugees were found, but actually they're everywhere. Even in our small town here in Tennessee, there's refugees right near us, within a few miles. And so it's just a matter of kind of becoming acquainted with who they are and where they are, and then reaching out to them.
So
Yes.
that's another question. How do we find out? Can people contact you?
Yes.
How do you find out if you go to a new area? Like, if I didn't know that there are refugees here, how would I find out?
Well, actually, You can Google it, just refugees and the name of your town.
Really?
And often it comes up. But the newest refugees aren't always in the news. And so a good way is to look up refugee organizations or contact the Public Assistance Agency. Because when they first arrive, they do receive public assistance for a few months, a very short time. And after that time, then they have to have jobs and be able to drive and be productive citizens.
I've learned the language well enough to take the driving test. And
yes, all of that, and find someone to take them there.
Rent.
Pay their rent, figure out their bills.
They also have to pay back the airplane ticket that brought them over
That's
here.
right. And
wow.
Right. So, but we are delighted for you to contact us too, because sometimes we discover refugees where you wouldn't expect them, and you can contact us through the North American Division. You could call the North American Division office.
Okay, we'll put your information up on the screen.
Yes, good.
At the end, so that people can contact you.
I like to think of it as an opportunity to be a missionary here at home, homeland missionaries.
Yeah.
You know, especially many people want to go overseas. Maybe they're afraid to go. It's too far. They might get sick. But we can be missionaries right here at home.
Right, and it has such far
reaching
reaching.
across culturally.
Right.
It's an amazing experience.
It is. Well, our time has flown by, but I just appreciate so much you sharing with us this burden and the need right here next door. I mean, many of us think of missionaries as, the jungle over there, but there's plenty of opportunity in the cities, even here, among the people that came from there.
Yes.
So I just thank you so much for sharing that burden with us today. And,
thank you for having us.
and I just want to encourage our viewers to look up their website. We'll put that on the screen for you at this time, and just pray for these people and seek them out and help them, because it won't take much of your time, but it'll make a world of difference for them. And even if it does take a lot of your time, it's the same as doing it for Jesus. So God bless you until we see you again on the Mission TV show.